We did just hear from Donald Trump about that incredibly controversial rally at Madison Square Garden on Sunday night. Let's listen.
Coalition. Nobody's ever seen anything like, I don't think anybody has ever seen anything like what happened the other night at Madison Square Garden. The love in that room. It was breathtaking, and you could have filled it many, many times with the people that were unable to get in. But politicians that have been doing this for a long time, 30 and 40 years, said there's never been an event so beautiful. It was like a love fest, an absolute love fest, and it was my honor to be involved. And hopefully, you know, they started to say, well, in 1939, the Nazis used Madison Square Garden. Well, and you know what? But can you imagine it? In 1939, the Nazi, they would. But how terrible to say, right? Because, you know, they've used Madison Square Garden many times. Many people have used it, but nobody's ever had a crowd like that. And I tell you what, right now, nobody's ever had love like that. That was love in the room, and it was love for our country. It was really love.
7 days out, when you're effectively saying, I am not a Nazi, it's not exactly the place where your campaign wants to be. And I just want to really fact check here. Just like he did about January 6th, he's trying to rewrite and tell us what we saw with our own eyes did not happen. It was not full of love, except for him. There was a lot of love for Donald Trump there. But if you are Kamala Harris, effectively called a prostitute, no. If you are somebody who is African American and somebody made a watermelon joke, not funny, no love for you. If you are a Latino, particularly somebody who is Puerto Rican, certainly no love for you. Jews, no love for you. And I could go on and on and on from multiple speakers at that very big rally. My panel is back now. I interrupted you before, Josh. You've been doing reporting from inside the Trump campaign about what they really think, not what he is saying publicly.
I don't think his most seasoned advisors thought that the pre-programming to his speech was particularly helpful on Sunday. I mean, anytime, like you said, you're a week and a half out, and you are spending entire 24 hours, denouncing, defending, Trump's doubling down on, what happened. I mean, it's not good. I mean, look, Kamala Harris's campaign, and you see what they're doing tonight with their rally on the ellipse, right, where they're talking about, democracy and Jan 6. They're trying to convince Republicans and independents, maybe right-leaning independents, but Republicans, you just don't have to vote for Donald Trump. You don't want that back in your lives. You might have liked your economy better, you might have liked things better, but their argument is you do not want him back in your lives. You're exhausted by him. And a lot of what Trump has said, on the economy and immigration and others, his team thinks is helpful. But when you have events like that on Sunday, when you have some of his more incendiary comments, they play into the Kamala Harris argument down the stretch. There's a reason you voted him out in 2020, and that's you don't want him back in your lives. That is their argument, and things like that, I think, give them ammunition for that.
We did not hear, we heard him say what he said, which is just makes no sense. He didn't take questions from reporters, and he did not apologize to any of the groups, particularly just the most politically important group to him, which are Puerto Ricans living in Pennsylvania and in other swing states, particularly Pennsylvania, where he's going later today. And that is the apology is what some groups and even some fellow Republicans are asking him to give. He's not an apologizer. He never has been.
It's not what he likes to do. And this was his big moment. Like, that's why he's saying it was so full of love. He was in Madison Square Garden. This is his what he feels like it's his pre-victory lap. So he doesn't want to sully that by, talking about giving an apology. That's not Trump. He's going to say it's a room full of love. I will say that the thing about Trump, often he'll talk about Harris and he'll say, oh, she's kind of, she's a lightweight or this and that. But it's really Trump who often is treated with these kind of kid gloves where it's like, oh, his people don't do him favors. Oh, he doesn't know, or oh, they don't give him good information. You're trying to be the leader of this country. You don't know what's going on at your rally. You can't get good people around you. Why? It's like, at what point are you responsible?
And I just want to just echo and just underscore what you're saying at the bottom of the screen. Just please note the quotations, absolute love fest. And listen to what we're saying. It was, and watch it yourself, it was not a love fest. I want to look ahead to what Kamala Harris is doing tonight. You mentioned it. We're going to talk about it more a little bit later in the show. Listen to what she said previewing the speech.
And I would ask people to imagine the Oval Office. People have seen it on TV. You know what it looks like. It's either going to be Donald Trump sitting behind that desk, writing out his enemies list of who he's going to seek revenge and retribution on, or it's going to be me working on behalf of the American people, as I always have done, working on my to-do list to see through these policies that are about home ownership, lifting up our small businesses, lifting up families with children, and lifting up the discourse in a way that it is not about trashing people all the time.
So there is the visual that is important tonight for Kamala Harris and her team. It is at the Ellipse, which is off the National Mall with the White House in the background. It's also the same place where Donald Trump spoke to January 6 people before they marched to the Capitol and attacked the Capitol. And so that is a contrast that Kamala Harris is trying to portray. Another thing that her team says that she's going to do, of course, she's going to focus on her character. They are hoping that talking about his character is really effective, especially with suburban, with women voters who don't want the image that Kamala Harris just laid out. There's going to be elements of abortion in her speech, too. But all of it is trying to frame a difference between who Kamala Harris is and who Donald Trump is. And potentially we could see tonight her responding to the Puerto Rican remarks at Madison Square Garden, because responding to Trump is also an element in these closing days.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think what's interesting to me is that the Trump folks think, and I don't know, their argument here could be wrong, their calculation could be wrong, but these character attacks on him are not going to work, right? The John Kelly coming out as former chief of staff saying he meets a definition of a fascist. The various folks who've come out and spoken out against him, who worked for him as vice president, not supporting him this time, all of the J6 accusations and documents that we've seen come out in recent weeks. They think all of that's baked into the cake, right? Kamala Harris's people clearly don't think that's baked into the cake. They think people are still swayed by that. So one of the most interesting sort of bets down this final stretch of the election is whether these character attacks against Donald Trump will work or not, right? His people think Trump has basically 100% name ID. You know who he is. You know whether you like him or not. Regurgitating all of this on their mind, they don't think works. Kamala Harris's people have a vastly different calculation, and I guess we'll see what happens.
Quick final thought.
I mean, I think that's the whole issue. She's been making these attacks on character, but the race is still very much tied. And so it's not clear that it's working the way they think it is, and that she really has to make the case for herself and who she is.
All right, everybody, thank you so much. I first want to ask if you want to respond to what you heard from the former president suggesting that this rally at Madison Square Garden was full of love.
Well, it's hard to have a response every time he says something like this. But anybody watching that rally, particularly if you're Puerto Rican or if you're Latino or any of the groups that were singled out and attacked, that you saw any love there, certainly not for you. I think anybody watching on TV didn't see themselves as being part of his club, of him working for them. It was divisive, it was racist, and frankly, insulting to talk about the American people that way. Very similar to how he talks about his January 6th rally, how that was a day of love. Nothing was loving about that day, not to the 140 Capitol Police officers that were attacked, or even his own vice president whose life was in danger. Nothing about that was love.